going to talk a little bit about paddock sizing and the principles and approach that we take with our farm. And then I'm also going to talk about portable electric fence and some of the challenges that might happen or stories you may have heard or experienced that have to do with tangling and animals. Good morning. I'm coming on to do my live Q&A. My name is Leslie. I'm a farmer with Cylon Rolling Acres in western Wisconsin, where I rotationally graze meat goats on pasture, and we also have a small flock of goats. And so I started a weekly Q&A series here on Instagram to share a little bit more about what we're doing on our farm and also help others continue to do their work and get started raising meat goats as well, especially similar practices like we do. I know there's a lot of, when we got started, you realize quick that there's not a lot of resources out there, and so that's kind of my why of why I share. So today I've got two questions I'm going to talk about, and they're both grazing related as it pertains to goats. So I'm going to talk a little bit about paddock sizing and the principles and approach that we take with our farm, and then I'm also going to talk about portable electric fence and some of the challenges that might happen or stories you may have heard or experienced that have to do with tangling and animals. So those are the two topics I'm going to cover today. And again, if you're on here live, feel free to pop on and ask questions. I have a form that you can submit questions for the future, and anything I talk about today, if there's more information or follow-up, I'm going to put it in the show notes and archive it on my blog. And so if you subscribe to my email list, my Raising Goats community on grazingwithleslie.com, you will also be able to get a quick email that points you to the archive of this live. All right, so diving into my questions. So any details on what works best for you in your rotation plan, size of paddocks, graze time, stock density. So I have a few principles that I follow with grazing our animals. So when we got started, we looked at, I wanted to know the specific numbers, and I think it's good because you want to make sure you're not overtaxing your land and managing it correctly. But a lot of it with grazing comes down to there's so many other factors beyond just the calculations of numbers. And so I'm really doing a lot of visual assessment on a daily basis on what my herd needs and also the condition of our pasture, rather than crunching numbers on what the math says that where we should be at. But I think some of that is helpful when you are making sure you have enough land to support your herd size. And so just a point of reference, we're in Wisconsin. We have quite a bit of rainfall, a lot of forage availability. Most of our grazing is on pasture or hayland. We do a little bit of work in our woods with brush. So there's some differences there. So the approach we take is I'm moving my herd every 1 to 2 days to a new paddock, and they don't return to a paddock no sooner than 30 days. Ideally, I'd like it to be 45 days. This is based on a lot of the research and study I've done regarding rotational grazing and also management of small ruminants, so sheep and goats on pasture. And the 1 to 2 days is really critical for, from an animal health standpoint. Goats and sheep can be can develop or have issues with parasite management really quickly, and parasite issues can be managed in a number of ways: preventative, genetically, and how it hurts animal selection, and of course using medication as well. And so we're keeping all those things in mind, but as we're grazing, we want to make sure that we're managing our herd effectively. So that is why we're moving every 1 to 2 days. There's some research that shows that shorter move time will help with reducing that parasite infection issues. So I will include that in the show notes as well. If you're interested in that, I'm a little bit of a science junkie. I like to know the research side of things. So the other piece from there, each of our with our paddock moves, I'm really basing it off of forage availability. So I'm looking to see what's currently there, and then watch kind of when I do my herd checks. Are they, how much are they eating? Is there enough for them to eat? Are they bellowing at me that they want to move? If it seems like they're being too selective, and there's plants being left, that might mean the paddocks too big, so we may have not right sized it. But my basic principle is take half, leave half, and that gives enough cover for the plants, or enough cover for the soil, and also allows the plants to recover and regrow, regenerate from there. And then from an animal health standpoint, we're not getting too low to the ground again. Parasite challenges and issues as well, other health problems. So it's really, again, it's assessing as you go, is really where I'm at on things. So that's really how we're taking our moves. But in general, if kind of from a number standpoint, for with our farm, I talked a little bit about our setting and our forage availability. Our paddocks tend to be about an acre in size, and we're running about 70 to 80 head of does or ewes with lambs and kids. And again, we're moving every 1 to 2 days, with about a 30-day-ish rest period. But that's probably, so we have about 20 acres that is in permanent fence. Our farm is larger than that, but that's where our permanent fencing is. And I would say that probably that ratio, or that stocking density, is probably about where our permanent pastures can handle for our size of herd, or flurd. Sometimes I kind of forget about the sheep bringing them in. So that kind of gives you perspective from that regard. As our herd continues to grow and we deal with seasonal challenges, for example, last year, we were pretty dry and we had a drought for part of the season. We actually included our hayfield in the rotation, and we also graze other parts of our farm that aren't fenced in, and also in our woods. And that will vary on the forage quality. And so that has become part of our rotational grazing system, as well as utilizing those other places on our farm as well. So we're able to continue to grow our herd, but also give our pastures a little bit more rest, which is good for helping improve their quality as well, too, not putting too much pressure on them. But again, I'll include some notes and some links to some resources that can help with calculating how those stocking densities can work, and how you can assess your particular situation. Just to give if you're getting started in determining how many animals you can handle or what kind of pasture size you need, it can be a good starting point. But from there, a lot of it is just observing and seeing what's available as you go. So there's so many factors when it comes to dealing with agriculture. You're dealing with Mother Nature and live animals and live things. There's a lot of variabilities from there. So the last question I'm going to cover this morning is regarding electric fence and tangling issues. So the question is, does your fencing work well? I've heard of goats and sheep getting tangled or getting startled and running into it. I want to get a small herd that I can move throughout our property, and have been researching good fence that can be moved. I've noticed a lot of folks using net fencing, but I've heard horror stories of them getting tangled up. So this is a really good question. So the way our grazing system is set up, we have permanent fence around our pastures, and that's our I'm looking out the window because it's there, even though I work with it every day. But it's our permanent fence is woven wire, and we have a hot wire on top. And so we subdivide our permanent pasture with portable fencing and connect to the hot wire there to electrify it. And so we are using two different styles of fencing. One is Gallagher's Smart Fence. It's a 4-reel system, all in one, with posts and electric reel. I like it because it works really well to quickly set up a paddock, and you're not dealing with, it's easy to move. I can just, once it's reeled up, I can put in the back of my gator. I don't need to worry about fences getting tangled. It just works really well. Of course, it's a little more permeable for animals, so you need to make sure your goats and sheep are fence trained to respect it and know that it's hot. The other fence that we use that works really great, but it takes a little more care and work to make sure you're setting it up right and you don't get too frustrated with it, is the net fence. And so we use, and I know a lot of goat and sheep folks use it, even poultry folks who raise poultry. So we use that electric fence, the net fence, typically in areas outside of our perimeter fencing. I will use the smart fence outside as well, but it's usually when it's more in our farmyard where there's a little more, I'd say, sense of security. We do have predators, and our dogs are with our herd, so it's just another peace of mind to have that using the net fence. So the net fence, I know it can cause even more challenges if an animal gets startled and gets stuck in it. So versus like the strand system, they can go right through it again. So this is where fence training, it's not going to, there always can be a possibility of issues and things that happen because, as you know, you have livestock, there's always something that can happen, especially with goats. But I found for us is if we fence train our herd in the beginning of the season, so we do a small paddock, a really small area, and usually it's like right when they first get exposed to eating grass again for the season. They get excited to be out there, but I make a small section area, and I make sure that when they go out to eat that grass, they all experience a little bit of that electric fence. It's not designed to hurt them, but it's designed to startle them, and so they learn quickly. Or a refresher, usually the issue is more with younger animals or animals who haven't been around electric fence before, but it really gets them in tune to respecting the fence. And once that happens, once they typically know to stay back, and they even can sense it otherwise. And so the fence training really helps. The other piece is making sure you keep your fence on. I know it can get really easy to like leave it up because your herd or your flock recognizes that it's a barrier, but they know when it's off. And so there may be some animals that will try to push it. The other piece is, especially with net fencing, because it is less permeable than a multi-strand system, if you're leaving it off, they will eventually try to stick their noses through and eat through it. But if it's hot, always hot, they will keep their space. That doesn't mean things aren't going to happen, but some of those pieces of keeping it hot and training really can help reduce those issues or those challenges from happening. So those are some suggestions and tips I would offer. I have, you might know, I have a fence training guide on my website, Grazing with Leslie. I'll link to it in the show notes as well. It's a good resource on kind of what the tools and tricks and process we do with getting our goats prepped for being on pasture or in a grazing situation. So they have to be pasture, but in learning how to respect that fence. So that's what I have for this morning. I've got to run. I've got my son has to get to the bus for summer school in our with our school district. In the summer, we're fortunate that we have a busing system for summer school, but it picks and drops off at a central location. So we've got to take them to a few miles, and of course we're out in the country, so it's still better than running into town. So, but thank you for joining me this morning. And again, I will put the replay in over on my blog with the show notes that go with it. And if you have questions related to this topic or future topics, I will include the link to submit a question, or feel free to submit a question wherever you're watching this, whether it's on Instagram or YouTube or in my blog, and I will put it in the kind of hopper list for future questions to cover. So thank you for joining me this morning, and I hope you have a great Wednesday.